Good morning, everyone. How is it going? Welcome back to Big Discussions 76 Science and Technology. So today we're going to look at a video, parts of it. I was sure to go back and timestamp it to jump to certain parts because it's a hour and 10 minutes long, and we don't want to sit and watch. The link is in the description box in case you all want to watch it all yourself. But today's going to be a bit of a learning event for all of us. We're going to learn a little bit about Dr. J. Bhattacharya and what's happening under his leadership at the National Institutes of Health. Um, this is something. This is not going to be too. How should I say? Uh, on the line or on the edge, but I thought it would be a good learning opportunity for you guys and for me as well. And because this involves the NIH, as I'll explain, this very much touched me because my science training to become Dr. Dunbar, it very much involved funding from the NIH. So when you think about the NIH, you want to think about research and you want to think about dollars. Okay, dollars, because science costs money. And when you think about someone like Elon Musk, all of those things, one of the criticisms of Mr. Musk was that the funding, the investment capital for his businesses, all of that comes from the government. So he's been a bit of his critics. I'm not saying this. His critics say that he um, is and has been a bit of a welfare recipient, because he's been able to take advantage of government dollars. Let me fix my banner is not live. Let me fix that. And also my subtitles are not live. So there's my ticker. And if I go to style, there are my headlines. All right. But before we jump into that, we're going to have a short surprise and what will be a returning installment here on the channel. So let me uh, announce this over on my first channel. And then I'll play the intro, and then we'll get started because we want to have something at the beginning that I want to show, and a guest to present something. And let me see. All right. Let's see. And whoever is there, please smash that like button, and also let me know who is there and any reaction that you have. Let's see. I am. All right, cynical optimist, you are the first one in. Thank you for announcing your presence. All right, I'm going to play the intro, and then I will welcome my brother Amal. He's going to talk to us about some of his Black history science creations using artificial intelligence. I'll see you on the other side of the intro.
Um, so Anwar, I see you have the periodic tables on your chest.
Mm-hmm.
So what's that all about? Why are you walking around with a chemistry chart on your chest?
Well,
yeah.
Cheryl, so this channel is a STEM channel. So when I was conceiving of it and figuring out how to grow it, I figured I should have some t-shirts to go with it. So
Okay.
the periodic table is critical to most of the scientific fields.
Welcome to Big Discussions 76, Science and Technology. Science and technology are all around us, all of the time, and there are always science and technology stories to tell.
There are always science and technology stories to tell in general, but there are also quite a few science and technology stories to tell in terms of Black history. And I'm going to welcome up my brother Amal Dunbar. He's popped into my onto my content numerous times. Sometimes you see him in my chat. Sometimes you see his comments underneath Dr. Kiasan Johnson's videos. So he's in and around the YouTube streets himself, and he's been pretty. He jumped on the AI train, and he reached out his hand and pulled me on the AI train. So he's been playing with the AI in a creative way, which is something for those of you who are familiar with Ask an Older Man. He's been very, very gung ho about everybody start using AI. So my brother has been he's going to tell us about it. He's been making some Black History creations and teaching tools, and if you look at my Instagram, you'll see those. So with that, I'm going to bring up my brother Amal. This is going to be a recurring thing as we go forward because part of developing an interest in the sciences, particularly for our people/ethnic group, is part of that involves knowledge of what we've done, and I'm very passionate about that. And our people have done a lot in the sciences, but it's not talked about a lot. So everybody, let's welcome up my brother Amal Dunbar.
Good
Good morning.
Bo. Thanks for having me.
All right. So I will enable the screen share. I have one of your creations up, and I'll hand the mic to you.
Okay. Well, over the last year, there has been some talk in some social media circles, comment
Just speak up
sections.
just a little bit more.
Okay. So, over the last year or so, I have noticed that in some social media spaces, the contributions of African Americans, or what some may call FBAs or ADOS, has been questioned. And from the intellectual property side, or the patent side, I was curious as to specifically, what were the contributions of African American inventors. So I began to investigate, and I found some things that were very interesting. Some of the technology, and some of the science, some of the hardware, some of the assets that we use on a daily basis have been created by African American inventors. So I thought that we could start with Marie and Albert Brown. In the actually, Marie and Albert Brown were a couple, out of the Oakland area in the 1960s. Uh, Marie was a nurse by day. Albert was an electronics engineer by day, but they wanted to work on home security. So many of the things that we take for granted, such as the peephole, such as uh, uh, video surveillance, or microphone communication in between someone who's on the outside of a door versus someone who's on the inside. They created that. So let me just read quickly what I posted to Instagram. Uh, Marie and Albert Brown pioneered the modern day home security systems utilizing TV surveillance. Um, their patent was issued in December 2nd, 1969. Concerned about safety in their neighborhood, they designed a system that used a camera to view visitors through peepholes, with the image transmitted to a monitor inside the home. The system also included a two-way microphone for communication and an alarm button to alert the authorities. So, Anwar, if you can scroll through those pictures, most of these pictures were AI generated, except for the second one. That's actually Marie and Albert Brown. But the other images were AI generated. All I did was find a bio on the Browns. I copied and pasted it into Chat GPT, and then Chat GPT wrote a prompt that I then copied and pasted into um, image generating AI apps like Google's Whisk, Google's Image Effects, um, Leonardo, um, and so yeah. So I've been posting uh, Black inventors over the past month, and this is leading to a larger project. Um, so it was important to me that there be an American flag somewhere in the background. Most of these images should have an American flag somewhere in the background. Actually, as I'm looking at these, I'm noticing that the only image that has the American flag in the background is the one of Marie on the back end, but that's okay. These images came out really well. The AI understood um, how to update these images to make them look sophisticated and modernized. Um, so so yeah. If anyone is curious about AI art and how to get what you want, one of the best things that you can do is to ask whatever AI. If you're using a chat bot like Chat GPT, you can ask it, um, can you write a prompt that will make the image look like ABC? And if you don't get what you like, you can ask it again. Okay, how can we alter this? How can we change this so that this comes out better? And you yourself, you can look at the prompt and adjust the text, maybe take some things out or add some things until you get the image or images that you really like. So hopefully, um, these images convey Marie and Albert Brown's contributions to home security, because for some of the things that we use today, it's because of them. And they definitely reshaped uh, home security, not just for this country, but for the world.
Okay, thank you for that. That's can you mute up really quickly, bro? Okay, that's powerful. Because this is powerful because number one, this image it shows a couple, and that this is something that as I was looking at these, that's the first thing that really stood out to me is okay, this is a husband and a wife, this is a couple, and it looks like they did this stuff together. Okay, and we don't see positive images of black couples today. That's one thing. So this is powerful in that regard, but also just I had no knowledge of that these people created these things, and I've said in my content that a lot of what I've learned about black inventors, it a lot of it came from hip hop music. I'm thinking specifically about "You Must Learn" by KRS One. So I think yeah, the more of this knowledge that we could get out, I think This is very, very powerful year round, not just restricting it to February. Yeah. And yeah, Indigo Flow says, "Yep, you must learn." He runs off several inventors in that track. Um, so you have others. You have a host of others, which we're going to go over in subsequent weeks. But once again, you used Chat GPT for this.
I primarily use ChatGPT to write the prompts for the other uh, AI art apps. So yeah, ChatGPT is at the top of the workflow, or what I would call a pipeline, or what artists call a pipeline. As you move art assets from step one, step two, step three, step four. Um, Chat GPT was probably my step two. I would, go and find some information about these Black inventors, and then I would just copy and paste it over into Chat GPT, and I would ask Chat GPT write a prompt that makes these inventors look legendary, heroic, and iconic. I told Chat GPT I almost want this to feel like these are sports cards, almost like football cards or baseball cards. Um, I want these images to be powerful, and to almost carry some sort of weight, because their contributions are significant.
Okay, I'm going to read two comments here. Cynical Optimist says, Sarah works very well. We introduced the software to our youth in our STEM program so they can learn about digital literacy slash cyber psychology by creating comics. Okay, we know someone else right now who's creating a comic using AI. And AV Media says, I'm using Cyberlink Photo Director and Promo to generate my images and animations. Okay. So it looks like all you guys are on the AI train now as well. Okay, I thought you were unmuting for a second there. All right. Um, bro, do you have anything else? Any reaction to those two comments or anything else you want to say about your, again, everybody, we want to make this, we're gonna make this a recurring part of my shows. But do you have anything else to say for this first time?
Um, at this point, no. Maybe offline, you and I can practice a little bit. Every time we do this, I have to kind of relearn the process. But no, thank you for having me, bro. This has been very cool. Appreciate you.
Okay, yeah, it's a learning process. I mean, once you come on the panel enough, um, you know what to do, and vice versa. Thank you. Look forward to doing it again. Oh, you just muted yourself.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, bro. Thanks for having me. Appreciate you, man. Love you, bro.
I love you too. Talk to you soon.
Peace.
All right, guys. That was our first Black History AI offering from my brother. Give me a second here. I'll be all right. I see Gigami is here. Gigami, thank you for coming through. Indigo Flow, let me give you a wrench. You're not wrenched up. up, and I don't have it going here on the YouTube side. Give me a second. Okay, Indigo Flow, you now have a wrench. You are a moderator over here. You are pretty regular. You donated. The bar isn't high for me to give you guys wrenches. I'm a small channel. My channels are small, so I like to reward the people who keep coming back. This is science content, and that's what in the Black community in the United States, that's somewhat unique. So I appreciate you guys being here. All right. So who is Dr. Bhattacharya? I mean, we've heard a lot of news about 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue since January. Well, actually, we're always hearing news about 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, whether it's presidents over the last 4 years tripping up the steps of Air Force One, over years before that, uh, you know, President Obama giving eloquent speeches, or President Trump talking about well, I will get into that right now. But we're always hearing news about 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, and with the changeover of any administration, one of the big uh, aspects is the selecting the cabinet selections, and also the agency secretaries and heads. So, but that wasn't the first time I'd ever heard of Dr. J. Bhattacharya. Let me know if any of you all have heard of Dr. J. Bhattacharya. So, my first time hearing about Dr. J. Bhattacharya, he's the gentleman on the thumbnail for this stream. I saw him on Twitter X during the World Health Crisis. You guys know that's what I call it. For a while, YouTube was policing what was being said about this, and who was even talking about it. So I am going to continue to call it the World Health Crisis, so that YouTube does not take this channel down or remove this stream or whatever. But the first time I saw Dr. J. Bhattacharya was on Twitter X, and of course he's of Indian descent. So when you see a name like that, you just kind of stop and look and say, okay, who is this? And also, who is this brown guy? Because the interesting thing is, I've worked with many Asians. Indians would be considered. So you have your Southeast Asians, that's China, Japan, Korea, Vietnam, Thailand, and then you have India, and then the Middle East. This is a little bit of humor here, but they consider themselves brown people. Okay, we're black people, but individuals from the Middle East, and even India and Bangladesh and Pakistan, that's how you say it, Pakistan, they consider themselves quote unquote brown people if you ever meet them and talk to them. So I was like, who is this brown guy? And he was very open about contesting what was going on with the pandemic. He was very open about contesting what was happening with the World Health Crisis on Twitter at that time. And I think before Mr. Musk purchased it, I think Dr. Bhattacharya, I think he was being censored by Jack Dorsey and Twitter, in much the same way that people were being censored and muzzled on Facebook and the Meta platforms. So he was very outspoken about our previous health apparatuses mishandling the world health crisis here in the United States. So that was my first knowledge of him. He comes from Stanford. We're going to hear about that shortly in this video I'm going to show. But this really made me think about, this also hit home because the NIH, Okay, we're going to learn a little bit about what the NIH is. This is the official website for the NIH, the National Institutes of Health. And unless you come from a science family, or a research background in the biomedical sciences, you have no idea of what the NIH is. And so as we go through this stream, hold on. StreamYard was doing my antenna thing. So as we go through this stream, you want to think about public health, but also research dollars. Okay, public health and research dollars. When I first started learning about the NIH, I didn't first start learning about the NIH until I got to probably my undergraduate studies at Johnson C. Smith University. Shout out to Marcus Williams. You always mention the University of Michigan, but you never mention our HBCU, Johnson C. Smith University. It wasn't until I started to dip my toe into the research world, and then once I became fully immersed in the research world, that I realized what the NIH was, or that I learned what the NIH was. And as I wrote in this essay here on my blog, I will drop this in the comment section, but I'm going to try to leave it in the description box for those who want to read it after the stream. Science, the science world is a world all in itself. It is a culture. It is a way of being. Okay, so it was a lifestyle. It was a community. It was, and a world and an ecosystem all in itself. So a major part of my science journey, in addition to learning about the NIH, was also learning how to do it, how to conduct quality experiments, and how to conduct reproducible experiments, but also learning how to manage my life. Okay, there's me right there, probably about 2003, 2004, in the, this is all public, in the Ozawa lab at the University of Michigan in Ann Arbor, Michigan. As I look back at this, there were several cultural adjustments. Okay, and when you launch into something like this, and if you know any young persons, particularly young Black men who are interested in the STEMs, there are cultural adjustments, and I didn't quite understand it at the time. The fact that we were dealing with millions of dollars, okay, and that we had these really, really high tech research projects, but there are certain parts of your culture, depending upon where you come from, you might need to leave behind. You might need to leave behind the hood. You might need to leave behind going to the clubs. You might need to leave behind, you probably will, certain dating prospects. Okay, you need to cull your life and trim some things and prune some things out of your life, particularly if you come from the inner cities. You won't identify with a lot of the pop culture images, the rappers, the a lot of what you see on World Star Hip Hop, a lot of going to the nightclubs, keeping up with the latest fads. You're becoming different, but different in a good way. You're setting yourself up to become a thinker, an inventor, a captain of industry if you choose to do so. But you have to make choices. You have to make choices, and you need to leave certain things behind. You can't be in and out of dramatic relationships. You can't be in and out of situationships and chaos, which happens a lot in our community. So there were a lot of adjustments there. I'm going to stop that here, and we're going to learn a little bit about Dr. J. Bhattacharya. This is an hour and 10-minute long video interview from the Hoover Institution, or the Hoover Institute. I am not going to play the whole thing. I don't intend to be on for 2 hours this morning and this early afternoon. So I timestamped certain things. We're going to watch the first part, and then I'll probably jump ahead. I'm going to use the Dr. Thunder model. Shout out to Dr. Thunder. I'm going to stop and give some commentary, read your comments, and vice versa. So Tony Yagami says, yep, indeed. And Tony says, remove the non-essentials. Indigo Flow says, Corrine, I'm doing fine. My sister, thank you for asking. Corrine, thank you for stopping through. It's always good to see you here. And for those of you who are in the know, before we jump into Dr. J. Bhattacharya, and this is also, well, let's just go down that road. For those of you who are in the know about the master teacher of BGS and more, from this is for the people who aren't in the know. There's a sector called the Black Manosphere. All right, it doesn't just talk about relationships and those kinds of things and misogyny and stuff like that, but culture. There's a lot of talk about culture in there. And one of the things that I really appreciate that the master teacher has said is that when you're a young Black man and you read and you're smart and you're articulate, that's a deterrent from that can be a deterrent from a mating perspective, but also you may be seen as a threat. To be a thinker, to read, to amass knowledge in your own community, that may lead to challenges in terms of you being accepted and you having a peaceful life there when you choose a mate, and just in general, because you're gonna go against the grain. You're gonna go against much of the grain. So being a smart, studious, inquisitive individual, that can have negative ramifications for you socially, particularly if you are a young Black man transitioning into a full-fledged adult. Gabe A, okay, guys, we're not gonna make this contentious. I'm not talking about you, Gabe A. I'm talking about a reaction to what you said here. The Black Manosphere primarily talks about relationships and Black women. Okay. But there are important cultural aspects as well, and younger boys who are in these fields, who are getting prepped for these fields, they do need to be taught about their culture and how they fit into it, and the history of their culture, and also finding their tribe when they're on these studies and when they complete these studies. What's your tribe? Where will you fit in? Okay, what will you need to do to fit in to your tribe once you become a STEM person? What things will you need to leave behind? Because they're going to be things you're going to need to leave behind. All right. With that being said, Dr. J. Bhattacharya. He was very, very, he is now the secretary for the NIH. Okay. And he had a lot to say about the global health crisis and how it was handled. Do you guys believe that the global health crisis, do you guys believe that the global health crisis was real? Okay, was it manufactured? Was it something leaking from a lab in China? Was it something that came from a cave of bats? Okay. But with looking back at the whole thing, that 4 to 5 year odyssey, what do you all think about that? All right, this discussion comes from the Hoover Institute. The Hoover Institution, that's a conservative. Peter Robinson, I believe it's Peter Robinson. Yep, Peter Robinson. I know Dr. Thomas Sowell doesn't have a lot. He has a lot of detractors. He's had Thomas Sowell on quite a bit, but he's also good friends with Dr. J. Bhattacharya. All right, and as we'll hear, I think the Hoover Institution is out at Stanford, and so when you think of Stanford, you're thinking, at least for the United States, you're thinking about the top tier cream of the crop. Stanford is an intellectual powerhouse for the United States. What we're learning now is that China is leaving us in the dust. That's a discussions about China and low literacy levels and China leaving the United States in the dust. That is a non-relationship and Black women discussion. That's happens in the Black manosphere sometimes. It's happening right now. So without further ado, let's learn about Dr. J. Bhattacharya. Fair use, fair use. And there are a lot of things in here that dovetail into other areas. Fair use, fair use.
4 months ago, the best place to find my guest today would have been in the office he had occupied for more than 2 decades in an out-of-the-way corner of the Stanford campus. And when he came to the door, he would have been wearing his favorite item of clothing, a Stanford hoodie.
So guys, again, when you think about Stanford, I'm not saying Stanford is MIT or Georgia Tech, but Stanford, you know, it's close to Silicon Valley. Stanford is an intellectual powerhouse. Fair use, fair use.
Today, that man is the director of the National Institutes of Health, Dr. J. Bhattacharya, on Uncommon Knowledge now. Welcome to Uncommon Knowledge.
I love those violins at the beginning. So again, we're going to listen to the intro. It's probably about 10 to 15 minutes. And then I'm going to jump ahead and I'm going to give commentary throughout. This is the Dr. Thunder model. Shout out to Dr. Thunder.
Peter Robinson, a native of India, Jayanta Bhattacharya. Did I get that close?
I can't pronounce it myself, Peter.
Jayanta Bhattacharya moved to the United States with his family when he was a child. After growing up in Southern California, Dr. Bhattacharya enrolled in Stanford University, where he earned his undergraduate degree, his master's degree, his MD, and his doctorate in economics. And
so think about that. Let's see, undergraduate degree, master's degree, medical degree, and I believe he said a PhD in economics. He's from an Indian family, they emigrated to the United States when he was young. So I'll also think about on my main channel, my original channel, Ray Alexander once said, okay, you should cover why Asian families are killing it in the United States. So when I was watching this, I had to watch this a couple times. That dawned on me. He comes from an East Indian family where education is valued. I mean, legitimate education, okay? Because just getting a degree is not education, okay? So reading, scholarship, curiosity, industriousness, that's the type of family and community this individual comes from. And these are the type of individuals that you want in charge of your government agencies. Fair use.
and then became a member of the Stanford faculty. During the COVID lockdown, Dr. Bhattacharya helped to write the Great Barrington Declaration, a document that opposed the lockdowns.
So the Great Barrington Declaration, this is in the description box. I was gonna, maybe I'll read it in another live stream, but this is in the description box in case any of you guys want to read it. The Great Barrington Declaration. I think, yeah, several other health professionals. This says, as infectious disease epidemiologists and public health scientists, we have grave concerns about the damaging physical and mental health aspects of the prevailing C-19 policies and recommend an approach we call focused protection. So there were 941,261 signatures. It was in multiple translations. This is it. Dr. Bhattacharya was one of the co-signers. This is in the description box below in case you all want to read it for yourselves. I believe in being an educated populace. If you are educated, you can make sound voting decisions and not just do what CNN and MSNBC tell you what to do or how to think, or The View.
Calling instead for focused protection, that is, concentrating efforts on those most at risk while reopening schools and places of work. For taking this position, Dr. Bhattacharya found himself censored on social media and under attack from public health officials. The then director of the National Institutes of Health, Dr. Francis Collins, referred to Dr. Bhattacharya as, direct quotation, a fringe epidemiologist, close quote. Then came the election of Donald Trump, and the new director of the National Institutes of Health is the fringe epidemiologist, Dr. J. Bhattacharya.
So he was called a fringe epidemiologist from the previous secretary or director of the NIH, and then he ended up becoming that person's successor. And when the current administration chose him to be the director of the NIH, I knew who he was, so I was kind of like, oh wow, this is legitimate and it's significant.
Jay, welcome back to Uncommon Knowledge.
Thank you for having me, Peter.
In the interest of full disclosure, I suppose we may as well admit that we've been friends for a quarter of a century.
A little longer than that.
Oh, stop there.
We're both old, Peter.
Stop there. And for that matter, that you and I was with you when you picked out that
helped me pick the suit.
that very suit.
Right.
For your information, 5 days before Jay left Palo Alto to move to Washington, we had a conversation and I discovered that he owned exactly 2 suits and that one was a suit his mother had bought for him when he was on the high school debate team. So we went to a shop and bought some suits.
You know, that stood out to me because when I was at Michigan, that's what I saw. Okay, the faculty in my department, they were not fashionistas, they were not dressers. Okay, and I think my graduate advisor, I think he had the same suit whenever he went to a professional meeting or he went to give a talk. He had the same suit. I never saw him. Well, we know how big a deal fashion is, okay, particularly in the Black community. So these individuals at these research hubs and these thought centers, they're not thinking about, being the cleanest looking individual. Anyway, that stood out to me when I watched this. 2 suits, one from his mother that he had since high school.
Okay, so Jay, this leads to my very first overarching question. You arrived at Stanford University in 1985 at the age of 17. Aside from a couple of very brief stints, you were at Rand for a while, but aside from a couple of brief stints, you spent your entire life at Stanford University. I once asked you what was the biggest outfit you had ever overseen, and you thought for a moment and said, I had 6 researchers working on a project once. Here you sit in a suit, director of the National Institutes of Health, an agency with over 20,000 employees and a budget of $48 billion. Jay, I say this as a friend. What do you think you're doing?
Peter, the key thing I've learned since I've taken office is you have to get help. You have to get people who know how to do the things that I don't know how to do, and that's been probably the best surprise for me is the number of amazing, excellent people that I've found to help me accomplish the impossible.
So step 1 in running an organization that large is to find good people and learn how to delegate.
Yeah.
Okay, and that's been easy for you somehow.
You have no choice. When you're running an organization with 20,000 people, you have to delegate. But the key thing, I think, is to provide a vision, a clear direction about where I would like to see the organization go. And there are real challenges. I'm sure you're going to ask me about that in just a bit, right? But,
yes.
That the challenge that the NIH faces in light of what happened during the pandemic. And so that I viewed that as my primary job, to convey both to the organization, but also it's not just a corporation or something like that. It's a government. It's the most important biomedical research institute in the world. It's a part of the federal government. It answers to the American people. So I have to convey not just to the people who work there, but to the American taxpayers who fund us, whose interests we're supposed to be serving.
You have to defend that $48 billion.
Yeah.
So everybody think about this. So and I don't want to make this political. I mean, they do dip into some politics in this discussion. I mean, because he's the head of the NIH, but who's qualified? Who is qualified to run a government agency? Okay, so he has his an undergraduate degree. I don't know what that's in, but a master's degree, and then a medical degree, and then a PhD in economics. So this guy, I don't think he had federal. He had never embarked on federal service before, but to me, this guy is more than qualified to be head of the NIH. Okay, and you can just listen to him talk. This is a smart guy. Now, some of our other elected officials and our people on Capitol Hill and people who've gone through the White House, are they as sharp as this guy? That's just a rhetorical question. Very use.
To the American people. Um, you and I have talked on this show half a dozen times about the COVID experience, so we needn't go into that at great length now. But it forms the background of, as I understand it, but it forms the background of all your thinking about the NIH. So what I take as the central lessons of the lockdown is that the lockdown itself was an overreach, that the public health officials were acting at least in large measure on political calculation and not entirely on science, that much of what they portrayed as science wasn't science, and that they got one big thing after another wrong. So you put up on X, you put up a post shortly after you were nominated. I am honored and humbled by President Donald Trump's nomination of the next NIH director. We will reform American scientific institutions so that they are worthy of trust again. How's the project going?
So everybody think about that. What they just said was during the World Health Crisis here in the United States, a lot of decisions were politically made as opposed to scientifically made. Okay, there's a difference there. Politically made and scientifically made. And in that statement, that tweet, he said, okay, we want to reestablish the public's trust. So much of the public lost its trust around that time in the government and also in the government's scientific apparatuses.
We've made some progress, but there's still a long way to go. Let's just say I had actually been studying the NIH as a matter of my own research for a long while before the pandemic. And so I had identified some problems. I mean, this is not all that novel because a lot of people identified the same problems. The fact that the NIH is responsible for addressing a crisis in the scientific community of people being unable to replicate basic work. I'd worked on measuring the sort of inherent risk aversion of the NIH research portfolio, which often avoided investments in things that would potentially have enormous benefits, but risk becoming failed projects. The goal is to like have every single project succeed, but if you have that, then the whole portfolio as a whole is a failure because you have.
Okay, so you're gonna hear as we jump around. I'm gonna let this first part go a little bit longer. He's gonna talk about research portfolio. When you hear portfolio, think this. These are some ones, but when you think portfolio, think this. Money. It costs money to do research and to do science.
You haven't made the big advances. This is all stuff I'd worked on before the pandemic.
So can I want to come to all of that. Could I also, this is the layman here. This is the layman sitting back in California, watching NIH and watching you. But before we depart from the COVID experience altogether, one of the things that always struck me, I don't think I ever asked you about this actually, but you conducted a study. You got some donor to give you $5,000, the princely sum, as I recall, of $5,000. Wasn't that what it was?
It was actually, you're talking about the seroprevalence.
Yes. So you conducted a study in March of 2020, asking, wait a minute, let's see if we can find out just how infectious this thing is.
So that was his paper there. I tried to find it before. It just flashed it. Hold on. Okay, there it is. See, I don't want to say it. I don't want to say it. I don't want YouTube to strike this. C19 antibody seroprevalence in Santa Clara County, California. Okay, so he did an independent study funded by someone else at the beginning in 2020, and his conclusion was there's concern, but it's not so bad.
Out just how infectious this thing is. So you tested people in Santa Clara County, and you discovered that it was more infectious but less lethal than the public health authorities understood. And it has always struck me right there, this strange failing NIH, CDC, we are talking about budgets of tens of billions of dollars a year. And yet it fell to Jay Bhattacharya and some donor who was willing to pop $5,000 to conduct the first such study. Why wasn't NIH conducting studies all over the country? Why didn't they have good data by that point?
That was a failure of the public health establishment in this country. They should have conducted that study
immediately, shouldn't they?
Not in February 2020. They should have had measures of how widespread the disease was much earlier. I wrote an op-ed, which actually you helped me design because I'd never written an op-ed before.
That was their op-ed. Is the C virus as deadly as they say?
To say that in the Wall Street Journal in March of 2020, to say, look, we don't know how widespread the disease is. It's a vitally important fact that we need to know to design the right policy.
Yes.
And let's immediately learn that. Let's conduct a study to do that. That $5,000, by the way, it was to Stanford, not to me. I saw $0 of it myself. The fact that the public health establishment failed to do that should have been a signal that there was something deeply wrong with how the
from the get-go,
from the beginning.
All right, replication. This is one of the 3 big initiatives that you've spoken about that you intend to undertake at NIH.
They're going to talk about replication right now. I'll just let this go a little bit further before we jump ahead. No Guarantee says Indians are in prominent roles throughout the private and public sector. I would argue they have exceeded African Americans' current contributions in government by far. That's a powerful observation. That's a powerful statement. And well, and he says, and in the private sector, they are heads of tech for the more popular Fortune companies. Thank you for noting that. And again, going back to my Patrick Bet David video and the whole question of why Asians are killing it, this is part of why. Okay, this is part of why. They're going to talk about replication right now. I'm going to show something really, really quick so you guys have a context for what this means, replication. Okay. And the people who are killing it in the country, these are things people are talking about. Let's see. So this is my first research paper. So this is chapter 1 of my thesis. This is publicly available. If you Google this, you can eventually get to this paper. Okay, it's called, drum roll, Ubiquitination and Degradation of Neuronal Nitric Oxide Synthase in Vitro Dimer Stabilization Protects the Enzyme from Proteolysis. We're not going to unpack all that right now. But when they start talking about replication, one of the keys to science is, can somebody repeat your experiments, and using other approaches, do other groups find the same thing? And if other groups find the same thing, then you know that you have a solid finding. Okay, that's kind of, it might be a little abstract for some of you all, but replication and reproducibility, those are very, very important. And I just mentioned the master teacher. He said that in some of his content, is that when you read and when you study, you start to find the truth when different entities arrive at the same conclusion. Multiple entities arriving at the same conclusion. And if you don't have that, you have a fraudulent finding, and you have suspect science.
A couple of quotations. Again, this is me. You know what a layman I am. I'm just trying to figure out what is this business about replication? Here's quotation number one. This comes from a 2005 paper. This is 20 years ago by your Stanford colleague and friend, John Ioannidis. Quote, "It can be proven that most claimed research findings are false." Let me repeat that. It can be proven that most claimed research findings are false. Close quote. From a 2021 article in Science. The Reproducibility Project Cancer Biology set out to reproduce experiments from 53 high-profile papers published between 2010 and 2012. Consistent with replication efforts in other areas of science, original positive results could only be replicated 40% of the time. Only 5 of the 53 papers had results that could be fully reproduced, close quote. So Ioannidis says, 20 years ago, the scientific establishment is letting colleagues get away with it. Nobody's repeating anybody else's experiments. And then 15 years later, we get more studies saying, you know what? We've tried 53 studies. These results are all over the place. We can't replicate them. This is the most basic work that the scientific establishment does. Science. Testing results, making sure that we know what we think we know. Am I losing my mind? This strikes me as obvious.
So
and it takes you to say so?
Well, I mean, brilliant people like John Ioannidis have been saying this, as you say, for decades.
So reproducibility, Giagami says predictability of results and reproducibility / replicability of results. Yeah, so this is not about feelings. It's not about how you feel or what your spiritual or political leanings are. It's like, what do the results show? Can we show them? Can we reproduce them? Can we show them again? And do they agree with others' results? Okay, there's, this applies here, and it applies in other areas as well.
Let me describe the fundamental problem. There's some very flashy things having to do with scientific fraud that are part of the problem, but are not the root problem.
So that Alzheimer's research is,
for instance,
that's obviously fraudulent.
Yes, there's scientific fraud, but the root problem is that we have a scientific culture that doesn't recognize how difficult science actually is, and it punishes failure too sharply and has the wrong standards of truth. Those are the fundamental reasons. So let me just tease that apart in just a bit.
Yes.
I'm going to jump ahead after they finish this discussion about standards of truth. That's an important term. Standards of truth. That's an important concept here and in other areas.
So first we'll start with the standards of truth. A paper that is published in a peer-reviewed journal, folks think that means that if it's published in a top peer-reviewed journal, therefore it must be true.
That's what I've always thought.
And that's actually inaccurate, right? So the peer review process, what happens is I write a paper, I'll send it to a journal. If I'm lucky, the journal editor will send it out to 2 or 3 peer reviewers chosen by the editor. There's games played to try to influence the editor. If you're friendly with the editor, they'll send it to friendly peer reviewers. The peer reviewers themselves might read the paper, look for logical errors, maybe have some questions that they want addressed, but they won't actually replicate the results of the paper. They won't have the data to produce the paper. They're just reading the paper. They're not looking at the actual data. It's very, very rare, almost unheard of in biomedicine, for the peer reviewers to review the data themselves. And so then if the peer reviewers sign off, the editor signs off, you get it published in a peer review journal, that doesn't mean that the result is right. It just means it's passed through this peer review process, which doesn't check to see if the results is reproducible.
It doesn't mean the results are correct. It just means that the establishment has
signed off on it.
Okay, that is a couple things there. So this, my first author paper, this had to be peer reviewed. So this went into a journal. This went into, if I recall correctly, this went into molecular pharmacology. Okay. And again, it's editors, it's 2 peer reviewers reading it, giving feedback, and saying, you guys need to look at this, this, and this before we can green light this. But no one actually went back no one there went back and tried to reproduce our experiments. So it's kind of a honor code thing, but that's significant because this shows up here and it shows up in the climate discussion. Science is science, no matter which science you're doing. And one of my favorite scientists, Dr. Willie Soon. I'm sure you guys, if you watched me the last couple weeks, you heard me play this clip here. Dr. Willie Soon.
Every time you say, can we have a little debate? I don't understand your facts. Can you explain to me? Teachers say, no, no, no. Al Gore says so.
Actually, no, I think it was this one. This one.
It turns out that this climate is among the most misunderstood subject because Al Gore, the average D student, thinks that he understands climate. My God, it's as sure as gravity. He always say that. You guys are just denier, right?
Okay, there's one clip I have where he says, every time we ask for the data, show us the data, show us the data, show us the data, they cry and say the dog ate my homework. So the whole climate piece. So Michael Mann, he was in the news this week talking about how we're kind of at that dangerous point. We're approaching the 1.5 degree increase for the planet. Michael Mann would be in the climate. Oh, geez, they're the climate skeptics and the climate enthusiasts. Anyway, one of the controversies in that realm, and that's hotly contested, is the sharing of data. Okay, and whether or not one person is willing to share their data with another person. Okay, maybe Giagami generated data, or maybe Alonzo generated data. If you're scared to show me your data, that calls into question the validity of your data. That calls into question the validity of what you're asserting. Okay, you have to let other people look at it and vet it and see if it's real and see if it's legitimate. So that's why all of this matters. Standards of truth, standards of truth, standards of truth. Just because you find it on Google, does that make it right? Does that make it accurate? That came up in one of the master teachers live streams probably several times. Please smash that like button. We're going to jump ahead in a moment.
Right?
Wow.
And that's how you advance in science, is you get a CV filled with peer-reviewed papers. You can look at my CV, it's filled with peer-reviewed papers. That's why I have a position at Stanford, or had a position at Stanford University.
So you're telling me I should be much less impressed by your
You
work?
absolutely should be much less impressed by not just my work, but by every. And now, fundamentally, the scientific process is hard, right? So the published peer-reviewed literature then will have some results that are false positives. And when I say that, what I mean is that they're published. You think they're true because they're published, but they're not true.
Right.
And that paper that you cited by John Ioannidis makes a very convincing claim, just based on the standards of how we decide what scientific research can get published, that a large chunk of the published peer-reviewed literature is probably false. Not intentionally, it's just hard to do science. I may have a result, and I think it's true. I've done some investigation into it, but it might not be true, because maybe I made some error that I didn't realize. Maybe the thing is just a lot of things just happen, and you haven't thought of everything. The right standard of truth in science then is one paper making a claim and it's peer reviewed and it's published in a top journal. The right standard of truth is, do other independent research teams asking the same question using different methodology, do they arrive at the same conclusion? And
standard of truth. Do other groups arrive at the same conclusion, or is it just one person's assertion? Salute to Passport OG. Salute to the GOAT for stopping through. Again, let's listen to that again. Are multiple groups converging on the same answer, or are we just going with one answer? All right, we're going to jump ahead after this one, but this is a powerful principle.
is probably false. Not intentionally, it's just hard to do science. May have a result, and I think it's true. I've done some investigation into it, but it might not be true, because maybe I made some error that I didn't realize. Maybe the thing is just a lot of things just happen, and you haven't thought of everything. The right standard of truth in science then is one paper making a claim and it's peer reviewed and it's published in a top journal. The right standard of truth is, do other independent research teams asking the same question using different methodology, do they arrive at the same conclusion? And if lots and lots of research teams arrive at the same conclusion,
then we have something.
Yeah. So you mentioned, for instance, that Santa Clara seroprevalence study that I conducted. It was a very controversial result very early in the pandemic. But dozens of other research teams around the world asking the same question in different settings, in different places, found results that were roughly congruent with that result. The fact that the paper was published in the International Journal of Epidemiology, I mean, I was glad it was published, but that's not what makes it true. What makes it true is the independent replication by dozens of other research teams that found very similar results. In places where people were older, they tend to get higher death rates. In places that people were younger, they tend to get lower death rates. We were kind of right in the middle, because we were looking at people who weren't in nursing homes.
Right.
And so you have a basic thing where everybody learns science, and they first introduced science in 4th grade, they learned about replication. But the entirety of the scientific infrastructure is set up to not have that as the standard of truth.
Okay, so that strikes me as mad, and it makes me, I mean, I'm here to represent the angry American public, that billions upon billions of dollars get spent on this year in and year out, and nobody does double checking, is essentially what you're saying. But
So I like that Dr. Bhattacharya, he was a little self-deprecating there a little while ago. He said, yeah, you shouldn't believe everything that I've published. I mean, it's probably real, but he was saying that, okay, there are flaws in our system. And again, we're back to money and dollars being spent. Is this efficient? Is this current system working?
you're also saying to me, American public, calm down. Science is hard. Scientists are in some way or another, you could almost describe them as victims of a process, of a procedure, and we need to change the institutional approach of the research project throughout the country. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, I'm going to jump ahead here. I might come back and revisit this later. We're going to talk about the actual research apparatus and process in this country. We're going to jump ahead to 30 minutes to, because they say some words about the life expectancy in this country. When the NIH is supposed to be helping to improve the life expectancy in this country. Fair use, fair use.
Exclamation mark on it. Since 2012, between 2012 and 2019, there was no increase in American life expectancy. I had grown up with this.
Go back just a little bit. Okay, I think here. So life expectancy. And okay, standards of truth. That's analogous and that translates into other areas. Okay, one of the criticisms of YouTube and the YouTube spaces and the mail spaces, and you guys are living online, this, that, and the other. But if multiple research entities, multiple groups, multiple people are experiencing the same thing, then that gives that lends to a standard of truth. That lends to a corroboration of something. All right, life expectancy.
Guild. That sounds like a closed shop protecting itself. I'm sorry to say, protecting itself.
It's broken, and I want to fix it. And people have recognized this is broken for a long time. But I think the NIH.
There have to be all kinds of good people within the system who, in some sense, know better.
Yeah, I mean, but again, the incentives.
Let me jump ahead here. Okay.
In
science, we're bad at PR.
Quote, an estimated 129 million people in the US have at least one major chronic disease. That is heart disease, cancer, diabetes, obesity, or hypertension. 5 of the top 10 leading causes of death in the US are or are strongly associated with preventable and treatable chronic diseases. Over the past 2 decades, the prevalence of chronic disease has increased steadily, and this trend is expected to continue. About 90% of the annual 4.1 trillion healthcare expenditure is attributed to managing and treating chronic diseases, close quote.
So what that's arguing is that the NIH is failing in its job in terms of treating disease and the overall health of the country.
So I put it to you, Dr. Bhattacharya, you know you're in trouble if I call you doctor. Over the past 20 years, the NIH alone has spent some $700 billion. And over the past 20 years, the American people have gotten sicker, not healthier.
So once again, we're back to money. How much money is being spent versus what are the results we're getting? Tutriv says they've just been washing money in the NIH just like the other government programs. Thank you for that, Tutriv.
What's going on?
Let me just emphasize your point, put an exclamation mark on it. Since 2012, between 2012 and 2019, there was no increase in American life expectancy. I had grown up with this idea that modern medicine, the sort of
we were going places.
Yeah, science was advancing our health, and the hallmark was that is year after year after year, life expectancy kept getting longer and longer and longer. American children born today are not likely to live longer than their parents. That is a scandal, because the mission of the NIH is to do research that improves the health and increases the longevity of the American people. That's the mission of the NIH. In that sense, the NIH has failed in its mission.
So children born today are not likely to live longer than their parents. Think about that.
Europe actually has seen improvements in life expectancy over the same period. And 2020, of course, there was you remember the event, what happened in 2020? But there was a huge drop in American life expectancy that didn't come back up to 2019 levels until 2024.
By the way, so are we still seeing in this suppressed or at least flat life expectancy, are we still seeing damage done during COVID? People who didn't go into for their cancer checkups?
Well,
because
the life expectancy is back to 2019 levels now.
Oh, okay.
Only now, but there's still the ongoing, lingering problems with making kids miss up to 2 years of schooling. There's a whole host of damage, psychological damage we did to the populations. There's drug abuse and deaths, and that are, there's still on the level, 80,000 Americans are still dying a year. 70,000 Americans are dying a year from drug overdoses. Before the pandemic, it was a fraction of that. Hundreds of thousands. What we did during COVID was a catastrophe, and that's partly why I'm in this job, is because I was trying to call out that catastrophe.
Right.
The policy catastrophe, not the catastrophe of COVID, which itself was a catastrophe. But the point is that the job of the NIH is to do research that fixes the problems you just said, right? Addresses those problems directly, and we have not done a good job of doing that. There have been a tremendous number of actual scientific advances, which I can point to. The NIH played a role. For instance, we now have, I think, a cure for sickle cell anemia.
Fantastic.
Huge advances.
So we might have a cure for sickle cell anemia. Okay, so I'm going to be on the lookout for that. But he's going to say something else powerful coming up pretty soon.
What we don't have is a way to manage the colossal chronic disease problem that Secretary Kennedy has pointed to, that President Trump has pointed to, and to use the NIH to solve the scale of the problem of heart disease. We don't have a way to solve the scale of the problem of type 2 diabetes, of obesity, of autism, of condition where autism is 1 in 31 kids is the latest numbers from the CDC have it, a huge increase from past years. And so what you have is a chronic disease problem at scale affecting the lives, the health and well-being of almost every American.
Everybody, every family,
yeah.
Whether you're ill or not, you've got a cousin who's ill or a brother who's ill.
And science isn't the whole of the solution, but science needs to be a fundamental part of the solution.
And for sure, if we're spending $50 billion a year on NIH, there ought to be something.
Yeah.
I mean, again, I speak as a taxpayer. We ought to be getting something for
And
this.
actually, if you look at the portfolio before I arrived, 15% of it was DEI initiatives.
Boom. If you look at the portfolio before I arrived, 15% of it was DEI initiatives. Okay. I'm probably getting myself in trouble by presenting that, but let's look at that again. So the question is, how much money is being spent? Where's the money being spent? Is this advancing the mission of the agency? Let's go back to that.
Every American.
Everybody, every family,
Yeah.
whether you're ill or not, you've got a cousin who's ill or a brother who's ill.
And science isn't the whole of the solution, but science needs to be a fundamental part of the solution.
And for sure, if we're spending $50 billion a year on NIH, there ought to be something.
Yeah.
I mean, again, I speak as a taxpayer. We ought to be getting something for
And
this.
actually, if you look at the portfolio before I arrived, 15% of it was DEI initiatives. I mean, we should be spending the money on science that translates to improving the health and well-being of every American, minorities, no matter who you are. The NIH should be supporting research that advances your health, right? Ideological boondoggles don't belong in the portfolio of the NIH. And that's something that we actually, even before I arrived in office, the Trump administration who worked to remove, and we've made some progress on that as well.
So ideological boondoggles do not belong in the portfolio of the NIH. Very interesting. Let's jump ahead. He says some words about a lot of people's favorite subject, Doge. So I'm going to jump ahead to 44 minutes here. We are almost done. All right, a few words about Doge.
Is correct?
Yeah, I don't know if it's 60 exact number, but I'll say that the distribution of NIH support to the universities of the country is incredibly concentrated.
All right.
And that's just a fact. It has been for a very long time.
Okay. So the question of managing NIH itself, again, I've got a gobbledygook of numbers and cuts and people screaming, and I just want to hear you have a lovely way of summing things up and explaining the larger issue. All right. As published in Stat, one of the leading science news publications, on April 3rd. So this is recent. Early last week, the Trump administration's federal government shrinking task force, known as DOGE, directed the NIH to reduce contract spending across each of its 27 institutes and centers by roughly 35%. That's a lot. The cuts are likely to further paralyze an agency that just lost 1,200 employees, including the directors of 5 institutes and the heads of several labs, and has had key grant-making, research, training, and science communication functions severely limited since Trump's return to the White House, close quote. That doesn't sound like a publication that's friendly to this administration. So we set that to one side, but the facts are the facts, Jay.
So Doge is a very big deal. It is especially a big deal here in DC. I'm on the ground level. So I've seen a lot of attrition in terms of our staff where I work over the last 6 months. But let's hear what Dr. Bhattacharya has to say about NIH and wasteful spending there. Okay, Passport OG says, the state of school lunch in America is shocking. Not only is ketchup a vegetable, but kids are punished for their parents' financial situation, recipe for disaster. Okay, fair use.
What's going on at NIH?
Okay,
from an administrative point of view.
Right. So the president, the White House asked the entire government to operate more efficiently.
We run a deficit of $2 trillion a year.
And we have $37 trillion of federal debt.
Correct.
It's not unreasonable to ask that, right? So, and the question is, are there operations run by contracts? These are not like generally contracts for scientific projects, that most of that money is through grants and also direct intramural research done inside the NIH campus itself. Most of those contracts are for administrative activities. There are many of which are essential, and but the question is, can you do those things more efficiently, right? So, for instance, the NIH had, you said 21 institutes and six centers.
I think that's correct.
I think what happened, I mean, that's correct, actually. So, but it turns out that most of the centers had their own communication shop.
I see. Okay.
Most of
Hold on, guys. I'm seeing my my antenna thing. Give me a sec here. All right. Can you still hear me pretty good? Please smash that like button if anyone wants to make a donation to the channel. My information is there in the ticker. If not, I appreciate your eyeballs. Can you guys still hear me? Thank you, Tony. So we're talking about wasteful spending.
So the centers had their own legislative affairs.
There are administrative efficiencies to be found.
Yeah, so that's how we've implemented those contract demands. The priorities that I've had in implementing them have been no cuts that will result in any patients being harmed, because we run randomized clinical trials where patients are enrolled. You can't just cut them without, you have to have some plan to like make sure the patients are cared for. Don't cut contracts that result in scientists being let go if at all possible. There were some errors actually in the classification codes of what scientists had for their occupation, where they were misclassified. So there were early like mistakes around that, having to do with problems dating back decades and where scientists were. And we've addressed as many of those as I can find. I keep finding some of those, but we've not let scientists go intentionally. And then third, no cuts to anything that harms the mission of the NIH, which is to do research that advances the health and longevity of the American people. Those are the priorities we used to do the cuts. We found a lot of places where we could just do stuff better without duplicative contracts that don't actually serve anyone's interest.
So Jay, you sound like a man who loves the National Institutes of Health.
I do love the NIH.
I mean, what kind of MAGA man are you? I thought I would be interviewing somebody who was attempting to suppress his Viking impulses to slash and burn and pillage. You love the institution.
I'll tell you,
you love the scientific project.
The MAGA movement is not opposed to the NIH. It isn't. What it's opposed to is using and corrupting an institution that should do good for the public, and instead becomes hijacked for ideological things or that fails during like events like crises like the pandemic, like or potentially even caused a pandemic or contributed to causing a pandemic, right? So what the MAGA movement wants is not that we have zero government. What the MAGA movement wants is that the government works for the interests, and in this case, the health and well-being of regular people. That's what the MAGA movement is about.
So you fit. We used to joke, although I wasn't really joking, that my friend Jay Bhattacharya is one part Mahatma Gandhi, one part Dr. Albert Schweitzer, and one part St. Francis of Assisi. In other words, humanitarian, gentle, kind. And you fit within this rough, tough, elbows out administration. You feel comfortable in the Trump administration.
I do. I've had conversations with President Trump, and he's curious about science. He cares about. He wrote a letter to the science advisor, his main science advisor, Michael Kratsios, committing the United States to being the preeminent nation in the world in biomedical research in the 21st century.
All right, we're going to jump ahead to the COVID. I almost said it again. The immunizations. We're going to jump ahead because this is something. Did any of you get immunized? I'm going to ask that question. Did any of you guys get immunized? I took the Johnson & Johnson, and I think I got the Pfizer once or twice. Guys, give me 1 second. I'll be right back. Had to pass a little bit of aqueous waste there. Okay, so we have so first of all, Deacon Brown says Doge forgot to look at the fraud in the B2, I think you meant bombers that the US will use to take out weapons of mass destruction. So we have some bad citizens here. Tony says, no, this is going back to my last question about getting immunized. Cynical Optimist said no. Deacon Brown said no. Two Trev says, I had the first round, no boosters. I forgot which brand. Okay. Yeah, I took the J&J, which was a traditional form of it, and then they axed that. YouTube didn't like that one either. And then I think I might have gotten one or two of the Pfizer's, which were the mRNA. I hope this doesn't get removed from me talking about this. But so far I've been okay. We've heard stories about people having adverse health outcomes, mysterious adverse health outcomes. LeBron James kid, he had a heart attack while playing a game. I've heard that younger men have been at risk for myocarditis. So a lot of there's some uncertainty as to it. But Robert F. Kennedy Jr. was under a lot of scrutiny before he got approved to be the head of HHS, Health and Human Services, Health and Human Safety, Health and Human Services. And one of the big things he got in hot water for was his position on immunizations. So Dr. Bhattacharya is about to say, okay, well, hold on. He was just talking about a specific thing. And we're going to look at that. Some more talk on RFK, and then we'll end with gain of function research. So this is the communication, guys. These are things that your mainstream news outlets aren't necessarily telling you.
In biomedical research in the 21st century. We're competing with China. China has actually made tremendous advances using, by the way, American technologies. And it's absolutely vital that we maintain that world leadership. And that is President Trump's goal.
Donald Trump wants us to be number one.
Yes.
And so does Jay Bhattacharya.
Yes.
All right.
Secretary Kennedy, the same.
All right. Can I?
So, but is that possible now with where our science education is, with the tenacity with which Chinese students are approaching their education? Is it possible for us to be number one or remain at number one in this particular area and others? I'm hearing some very, very atrocious things about K through 12 education in this country.
Can I ask here? This takes us back to COVID for just a moment, but there's a piece of news that I want to ask you about. And if I'm catching you unaware because you haven't, just say so. Yesterday, CDC Director Marty Makary, you mentioned him earlier. I believe you're friends.
We are.
All right, you're colleagues within the administration, but you're also friends of some standing. Marty Makary and FDA vaccine advisor Vinay Prasad published an update to the government's guidelines on COVID-19 vaccine boosters. They published this in the New England Journal of Medicine, a big-time journal. In that article, they wrote, quote, although the rapid development of multiple COVID-19 vaccines in 2020 represents a major scientific, medical, and regulatory accomplishment, big deal what we did and how quickly we did it, the benefit of repeat dosing, particularly among low-risk persons who may have previously received multiple doses of COVID-19 vaccines, had multiple COVID-19 infections, or both, is uncertain, close quote. So we're backing away officially, formally, from advice to get repeat boosters. Is that what's going on?
Not just boosters, but also the recommendation, for instance, that kids as young as 6 months old be given the COVID-19 vaccine. Right? That is, if you look at other countries, no country other than the United States, I think, or it might, maybe some, you'll find some exception, but like no country in Europe, for instance, I think, has a recommendation where kids as young as 6-month-olds get the COVID vaccine. That's unique to the United States.
So this is a long time coming, actually.
Yeah, and what I read that paper actually, and I think it's a fantastic paper. What that paper says is that if a drug company wants to have COVID boosters and COVID shots for kids as young as 6 months old, they need to produce excellent scientific evidence, randomized studies where they demonstrate an actual benefit to those people getting those shots, right? Not just did you produce antibodies, but did you prevent dying from COVID? Did you reduce the risk of hospitalization from COVID? Did you at least prevent getting COVID for 6 months? And this is like a minimum you would ask in order to market a product. Like, if you're going to market a product, you should be able to demonstrate that kind of benefit.
This niggling little question: does it work?
Yeah.
So that was a major point of contention during the world health crisis. So people took it, but they still got it. People took it, but they still got it. So apparently, from what I'm distilling from this, is that you need more proof. We should have had more proof aside from the generation of antibodies. So maybe it was supposed to stop people from catching or being invaded by the virus. I'm not a microbiologist or a virologist, so I don't know. But apparently, just the generation of antibodies, because you want an immunization to allow you to create antibodies against the invader. So apparently that wasn't a high enough bar for everybody to be taking it in mass amounts. Fair use.
Yes. And are there side effects? Are we looking at those side effects carefully? This asks the question to the manufacturers of COVID vaccines, says, please demonstrate to us that this product actually does good for the people that we're giving it to. Actual clinical good, not just productions of antibodies.
Okay. Now I have one other question here that's mandatory, and that is you and Bobby Kennedy Jr. Couple of quotations.
So yeah, RFK, he wanted to be the Democratic candidate. They had other plans, but he's now the head of HHS, Health and Human Services, and he got taken out to the woodshed over his opinions and thoughts on vaccinations, immunizations.
Most frequent line of attack on him, as you very well know, is that he's some kind of anti-vaxxer. RFK Jr., and this comes up from his confirmation hearings, quote, he's speaking himself, "News reports have claimed that I am anti-vaccine or anti-industry. I'm neither. I am pro-safety. All of my kids are vaccinated, and I believe vaccines have a critical role in healthcare," close quote. The New York Times on May 1st, just a couple of weeks ago. Health Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. on Thursday announced plans to require all new vaccines to be tested against placebos and to develop new vaccines without using mRNA technology, moves that extend his reach deep into vaccine development. The New York Times is always leery of deep reaches, and raise questions about whether COVID boosters will be available in the fall, close quote. Okay, what's going on here? You like this man. I know, because I've heard you speak admiringly of him.
I like him and admire him. I think he's not anti-vax. He's absolutely, so let me step back.
All right.
Right. So what's happened is we have a regulatory framework where vaccines are treated in a special and different way. I very fundamentally believe, for instance, that the measles vaccine is quite important for child health. I've said that multiple times. I believe it fundamentally. I've also heard Bobby Kennedy say that in the face of the measles outbreaks that have happened, that children should get the measles vaccine. Right? That's not a man that's anti-vax.
Right.
Right. What he said is exactly true, and this is every conversation I have with him reinforces this. He cares about making sure that people understand what they're getting.
Well, a lot of what we've been hearing about Secretary Kennedy is he's anti-vax. He's anti-vax. He's anti-vax. A lot of times you need conversations like this with trustworthy people on the inside to kind of set the record straight. So it sounds like from this, he's not anti-vaccination. He just wants people to know what they're taking, and he doesn't believe children below a certain age should be taking these things.
And in the scientific community, because of their successful history of vaccines going back centuries, the scientific community treats vaccines with kid gloves. Nevertheless, the regulatory bodies of this country have an obligation to make sure that the products we recommend, that especially children take, have a proven track record of safety behind them. And in many cases, they do. And but some cases, like the COVID vaccine for children as young as 6 months old, they do not. Like the fact is
incredible to me, but those were rushed through without the usual FDA safety
so
testing?
emergency use. Now, normally the safety testing of vaccines takes decades.
Got it. And we didn't have time.
Yeah. So I'm not trying to like indict anybody over this. I'm just a fact, right? So when in April of 2021, I wrote a op-ed with Martin Kulldorff, then of Harvard University.
So if if any of you guys want to read that was in the Wall Street Journal. Immunization passports prolong lockdowns. What looks like an easing of restrictions is actually a coercive scheme. Okay, Passport OG. So I think since you're in there, I think you had to. At that point you had to get. You had to get immunized to be able to travel to other countries. I think that's what that's saying. I didn't read that paper, but if you guys want to read it, that's there.
Arguing that children should not be given the COVID-19 vaccine, or not recommended. No, healthy children should not be recommended to get the COVID-19 vaccine. And the reasoning was there was a very limited evidence of benefit for children because they die of COVID at such low rates that you don't really have much to gain from the vaccine for kids. You're not preventing deaths. No randomized study had demonstrated prevention of deaths for children given the COVID vaccine. Right? That's not a randomized study. Does not exist that shows that. And there was a possibility of risks of side effects. So the benefit-harm balance tilted against recommending children to get this. Whereas, like older people, there was to put yourself back in early 2021, COVID was killing older people at very high rates, and there was some evidence that the COVID vaccine might prevent those deaths.
I know this, Jay, because you told me to go ahead and get vaccinated.
I got the COVID vaccine myself because I'm an old guy, right? So, so the balance was different for older people, right? So the right policy advice then,
based on the science,
yes, was no for children, yes for older people, especially for older people at a high risk with multiple chronic conditions that put them at high risk. That's a reasonable balance given the uncertainty.
And so all that Bobby Kennedy is saying is, let us not claim to know more than we know.
Correct.
And let us know what we need to know.
Right, and then make people make their decisions.
So he's fair as far as you're concerned.
I think my experience with him is that the press has treated him tremendously unfairly, in part because they believe that he is threatening financial interests in the pharmaceutical industry and elsewhere.
By the way, so let's face it, he is, and so are you. If you want to rearrange the way the scientific enterprise in this country is conducted, and you have just eloquently described ways in which you would like to shift incentives, have if there's a settled order that's very comfortable, and there is a settled order, and people within that scientific establishment are very comfortable people by comparison with average American incomes, they will scream. This is politics.
All right. Last part, guys, we're gonna listen to is involves gain of function experiments. This has come up quite a bit in the master teachers. Well, not quite a bit, but I as a scientist myself, that's not my field, so I didn't have a nice working understanding of what gain of function experiments were. But they talk about restricting gain of function experiments at the end of this. So we're going to end here. Once this part is done, then I'm going to wrap it up because I'm at an hour and 41 minutes. So restricting gain of function experiments, and that was implicated in the start of the World Health Crisis. Gain of function experiments. Fair use, fair use.
Jay Bhattacharya on May 5th. I'm about to ask you about something that has actually happened.
Uh-oh.
Most of this in prospect, but this is most of what we've been discussing is what you hope to do. Here's something that's happened. Jay Bhattacharya on May 5th, after the White House announced new restrictions on gain of function funding. Quote, this is you. This is a historic day. The conduct of this research does not protect us against pandemics, as some people might say. It doesn't protect us against other nations. There's always a danger that in doing this research, it might leak out just by accident and cause a pandemic, close quote.
So apparently in the first Trump administration, he greenlighted gain of function experiments, and now it's going back the other way.
Well, now, hang on. Gain of function research has been going on for decades. We have military labs and scientific labs that are constantly trying to figure out what the bad guys might do, tweaking viruses to make them more and more lethal, and then rushing to figure out what antidotes. I thought this was a fixed part of the scientific / military establishment. And you're saying, no, do away with all of it.
Well, so first of all, there's a bioweapons convention that President Nixon signed in 1973 that binds the United States. So we don't do offensive bioweapon research.
Okay.
Right. So that's
details.
That's
details.
the first, right? So,
right. So we really don't.
Right. We don't.
And we've
don't
held to that. Okay.
Right. Well, I mean, I've been in the government 6 weeks. I hope we've held to that. Well, I hope I don't find out we haven't. If I find out we haven't held to that, I'll go public with that.
All right.
But I will say this: what we have done is we, including the NIH, has supported a research program with the utopian vision of preventing all pandemics. The way the research program has worked is that we fund people, EcoHealth Alliance, once upon a time, to go out into the wild places, partner with foreign countries, including China, go out in the wild places, collect the pathogens in the bat caves or wherever.
Picking up bat droppings.
Right. So that we can catalog all of the viruses and pathogens out there.
Right.
Even if it's very unlikely that many humans will come in contact with those things. Bring those viruses and pathogens into labs, often in city centers, often not necessarily in high security environments.
So apparently, money is allocated for researchers to go out into secluded places, bat caves, and collect viral samples and take them back to study those and to prepare for pandemics. And as he just described, oftentimes in city centers, in low security facilities. Go figure.
Do research on them to see if it's easy to manipulate them and cause them to become more transmissible among humans. And the idea is, if we can identify those viruses and pathogens that are more likely to make the leap into humans, then we can prepare in advance. We can create vaccines and antivirals or whatever before they make the leap in the population, so that when they make the leap, we are already ready. Right. There's two major problems with that. One of what it working, which it doesn't, and then one of its safety, which it's not. First, if you make a study of a pathogen you found in the wild places that have never really ever infected humans before, and you create vaccines or whatnot to combat it, when they actually make the leap, evolution still works, right? It's not going to be the same virus you cataloged. These viruses evolve
very quickly
all the time. And so you have a snapshot from 10 years ago when you went to the bat cave, but you don't know what they look like now. And the vaccines and things that you've produced to try to prepare, you've never tested them on human populations before because no human had ever gotten the disease.
Do you guys understand what he just said there? Do you guys understand the significance of what he just said and the strategy for this and how it's flawed? So in other words, in 2000, you get this viral particle from a bat cave, spend 10 years researching it, and then a world health crisis comes. You spent 10 years researching it, and in that 10 years, the thing is mutated over a decade, and then by the time the pandemic comes, you're treating people with this particle you've researched, but the thing is mutated, so it's probably not going to be effective against the current variant. Look at all you smart guys in here. Roderick Edwards, cynical optimist, Gigami. They had no up-to-date data, so it was for something X amount of years ago. Gigami says they had a 1.0 solution for a 19.0 problem. All right, we'll listen to a few more minutes, then I'll wrap up. I thought that was fascinating. So the whole Operation Warp Speed, maybe it was just a nothing burger anyway. Because by the time the thing jumps into humans, then you're so far behind nature. Fair use.
Okay.
So this is a foolhardy way you pretend to yourself that we protected ourselves against a pandemic when we haven't. Second, the actual conduct of this research is very dangerous. And I think it's very likely that the COVID pandemic was the result of this kind of research agenda. Because it's not possible to guarantee, even in high security labs.
Are you prepared to say that the preponderance of evidence now is that COVID arose from a leak from a gain of function lab in Wuhan?
Yes.
Is that the position?
That's my position. Okay. And I believe it's also the position of various intelligence agencies of the government, as well as other governments as well, that have looked into this.
So if you guys remember, that was very, very controversial back in 2020, that it came from Wuhan, that it was the China virus. That was very, very controversial to say, even though it appears that may have been what happened. Fair use.
We were funding gain of function research in a lab of China. Something went wrong and the world shut down.
Yeah, dangerous. Now, I want to make a distinction. There's only a small fraction of the portfolio of biological experiments that people do that meet this category of dangerous gain of function research that have the potential to cause a pandemic.
Right.
It's tiny, tiny fraction. There are gain of function activities that people do that actually advance human health. Right. I'll give you an example. We produce human insulin using a gain of function experiment. What we do is we take E. coli, put a gene in. I'm not sure exactly what the current manufacturing process is, but you put a gene in that produces human insulin, and the E. coli, then you grow them and they make human insulin. That's a gain of function thing that has no chance of causing a pandemic.
Got it.
What we want is to make sure that researchers understand that they should not be doing research that has the chance of causing a pandemic. It's not, don't work on Ebola, don't work on a list of pathogens. It's, are you doing an experiment where even if you think you have a benign virus, a bat virus from the middle of nowhere that doesn't seem to infect humans, and are you doing experiments that augment them in ways that might infect humans and cause a pandemic? Then you shouldn't be doing that. At the very least, and the institutions that fund that work, that support that work, universities, NGOs, should understand that if they do that, if they allow that kind of work to go, and they don't have it as part of the regulatory process where say let's evaluate it from the point of view of the risk of causing a pandemic. If they don't say that work is going on, they sort of surreptitiously do it, and it's discovered ex post they didn't, they're going to face essentially existential threats.
Got it.
Right? It's so dangerous. It's like allowing everyone in the United States to have their own home nuclear reactor. right? Are you doing
Unwise.
things? Yeah, it's not most of scientific. Most of it's a tiny part of science. We regulate it. We don't do nuclear. We have a comprehensive nuclear ban treaty to make sure that nuclear testing ban treaty to make sure that we don't test nuclear weapons routinely, because it doesn't actually improve the security of anybody, but does pose.
Would you like to
risks.
see an international treaty like the nuclear test ban treaty?
I would.
On gain of function?
I would. I think that if it's not in any country's interest to invest in this kind of research, it doesn't give them any advantage in any geopolitical sense, and it does pose potentially existential risks to human populations. Just look at what happened during the pandemic. You can have an experiment like this that causes literally trillions of dollars of damage, killing tens of millions of people, with not just the virus itself, but the sort of outsized, inappropriate, damaging response to the virus. You really should be not doing that kind of research.
So this is one on which the planet
All right, let's get Peter's last word, and then I'll stop.
ought to be able to come together in your. All right.
All right, everybody. I've managed to almost go 2 hours. Blame it on my brother. But I wanted to, I saw that come up from the Hoover Institute. The Hoover Institution. It's the Hoover Institution. And Jay Bhattacharya, he said that I've only been NIH secretary for 6 weeks. So that was months ago. So anyone who does a podcast or does a video, you know that it takes time to edit it and prepare it. So that was months ago. So they crank out a lot of content there. But I saw that, and I became aware of him on X. Then it was Twitter during the World Health Crisis, and I said, okay, this would be something interesting to highlight, because there's a lot of things being said about 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue right now, and what's true and what's not. And I think that was an accurate discussion of Dr. Jay Bhattacharya, the NIH, the problems, the issues that it's been facing, what it does, and how they're trying to make changes over there going forward. So I thought that would be good for us to kind of focus on for one morning. And then, as I described earlier, there were some cultural things that I thought about leading up to this when I was watching that, which might offend some people, but I guess you can't say anything about without offending someone today. Speaking of which, Dr. Bhattacharya, he did say that we're the only country. We're the only country who does the underage vaccination thing. So I think we're one of the only countries who also believes in this.
Oh, okay.
Only women can have babies. I just want to let you know that.
Interesting. There are other people who can have babies.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, if they have a uterus, they can have babies, but they just might not identify as women.
Okay.
Those are two different things. Like, you can be biologically female, but you can't be biologically woman. Woman is a gender construct, a social construct. But if you got a uterus, yeah, you can have a baby.
Yes, that's the point. If you have a uterus, you can have a baby.
Okay, cool. Yeah, we agree on that.
If you have a uterus, slow down. If you have a uterus, you can have a baby. I think we're one of the only countries here in the world debating that. Shout out to Y'all Borgen. I changed the image on that drop to have the female symbol as opposed to the baby in the uterus, because I thought having the female symbol there, that would be a little bit more, there would be a little bit less shock value there to seeing that one. There's a new comment here. Well, it says there's a new comment, but maybe there isn't. Oh, cynical optimist. Well, cynical optimist. Well, Katanji didn't make things any better there.
Can I provide a definition? No.
Yeah.
I can't.
You can't?
Not in
Okay.
this context.
So you
I'm not a
believe the meaning
biologist.
of the
Well, okay, so that's meaningless without the question.
Can you provide a definition for the word woman?
But now the answer.
Can I provide a definition? No.
Yeah.
I can't.
You can't?
Not in
Okay.
this context.
So you
I'm not a
believe the meaning
biologist.
of the
And I had a viewer from Turkey about 2 weeks ago, and he said we don't discuss this type of thing in this country. So the United States is unique. Passport OG, you're there. Do you want to come and give the benediction? Since you're in you were probably in Japan during the World Health Crisis. You want to come and give the benediction? Shout out to Mr. Z. Okay, he says, what is a woman? Nah, I'm good. You know what? I'm at 2 hours. I'll just give the benediction myself. Guys, thank you for for watching this. And to anyone who's new here and who was offended by those drops, we like to have fun over here as well. So we don't just nerd it up and geek it out. We like to have fun. And there's a lot to have fun with today. You know what? Let's hear Just Hilarious one more time, and then I'll wrap this up.
Oh, okay.
Only women can have babies. I just want to let you know that.
Interesting. There are other people who can have babies.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, if they have a uterus, they can have babies, but they just might
Right.
not identify as women.
Okay.
Those are two different things. Like you can be biologically female, but you can't be biologically woman. Woman is a gender construct, a
Okay.
social construct. But if you got a
Okay.
uterus, yeah, you can have a baby.
Yes, that's the point. If you have a uterus, you can have a baby.
Okay, cool. Yeah, we
Period.
agree on that.
All right, everyone. Let me wrap this up and get to the other things I need to do on this Saturday. Quick plug for my book. This is available on Amazon. The paperback is $27. The hardcover is $35 for my YouTube subs. For the hardcover, I'm selling it for $25, and for the paperback, I'm selling it for $22. Just use one of those payment methods there. Let's see if I can do this. On this ticker, and send me your mailing address. I'm selling signed copies here. And with that, everybody, I'm going to wrap this up. Thank you for watching. Yeah, this one wasn't as. What did we do the last time? I think I did. I can't remember what I did the last time, but it was maybe it was something similar. This one wasn't as spicy and entertaining, but it was just knowledge for what's going on in our current times with the National Institutes of Health and what the National Institutes of Health are, and how it's succeeding or failing in its mission in terms of protecting human health and promoting science innovation, and what the current administration is trying to do about it. So that's what this was. Thank you to those of you smart guys and gals who hit the like button and hung out for the duration of this whole thing. So next week I might do a stream. I might not. I'll have to see what my schedule looks like. But thank you guys again for supporting the channel and for watching. Two Trip says very enjoyable, Dr. Dunbar. Yeah, it's a unique group that comes back to watch. Not everybody can understand and process and see the utility and the importance of this type of brain food. a lot of people, yeah, if it bleeds, it leads, and people, shout out to Gay Bay. People want to talk about, relationships and women, and of course those are important, but they're not the only thing. All right, so. All right, everyone, enjoy the rest of your Saturday. If you are watching, it wasn't the Mouse Utopia Passport OG. It was something else, because we I don't know. It's neither here nor there at this point. Anyway, enjoy the rest of your Saturday, everyone. I will talk to you the next time. Look out for the next live stream. And Passport OG, you know what? I think for my Monday stream on my original channel, I might highlight one or two of your videos on Monday. But I definitely want to finish watching the Diary of a CEO thing with the 3 feminists. That's worth capturing here and over there. So anyway, enjoy the rest of your Saturday, everyone. As always, remember that your attitude determines your altitude. Always try to do your best. Take care, and I will talk to you all the next time. To Triv, I just saw that. Thank you for the generous Cash App donation. I appreciate that. If anyone else wants to donate something to the channel on the playback, my information is there in the ticker and in the description box. Take care, everyone. I will talk to you the next time. Bye-bye.